Welcome back to our Power Breakfast interview this morning. Yesterday, President Uhuru Kenyatta announced what is called an executive order giving authority and power, delegated power to county commissioners to act on behalf of the national government in many respects in a 10-point delegation of power. The opposition Orange Democratic Movement, or called generally, criticized the move as an attempt to strangle devolution, or what the party called presidential authoritarianism. I'm joined in the studio this morning by the acting party leader of the Orange Democratic Movement, also known as Baba Lupita, recently, Professor Anyang' Nyong'o. Karibu, Prof.
Thank you very much, Makali. Not just recent, but always.
You've been made more famous by Lupita.
Okay.
So how is she doing, though?
She's doing fine. She's
Okay.
doing very fine, yes.
Right. She's not visiting home soon?
Maybe in December.
Okay.
Yeah.
She needs to come around and give a public speech to some girls so that we can inspire our youth, right?
I think she's intending to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the hard nuts of politics. Yes, the party said that the president's action was not a welcome move or is not in support of devolution. How so is that?
Well, you know, I think that if you look at the Constitution, there are obviously sections of the Constitution that the president used to do this, but they should not be used in isolation. The much more important thing is to realize that the president has a responsibility to maintain national unity, to ensure that people have access to services at all levels, but also to ensure that the cardinal principle in the Constitution of the two levels of government, interdependent but distinct, is maintained, because the two levels of government define the exercise of sovereignty of the people. Indeed, right. The Constitution says the sovereignty of the people is exercised at those two levels, two representatives. And secondly, Schedule 6, Article 17 of Schedule 6, right. It's very clear, and I'd like to read it so that people understand
so people also get informed about it. Yes.
Provincial administration. Within 5 years after the effective date, the national government shall restructure the system of administration, commonly known as the provincial administration, to accord with and respect the system of devolved government, to accord with and respect the system of devolved government established under this Constitution.
Yes.
It is not to accord with respect to the national government, it has to accord with the devolved government. Now, the effective date of the Constitution is the 10th of August, 2010. If you calculate from 10th of August 2010 to now, you realize we have only 1 year before we wind up the provincial administration. If 1 year before you finish the process of according with devolved government, you are now re-entrenching provincial administration with all the accoutrements of their hats and their uniforms and everything else, you raise a lot of political tension. So I think that the president really was ill-advised.
Is it that, you people in this country are just scared of the symbolism of the provincial administration, the attire, their regalia, so it reminds you of the old system? Or is there anything in the delegation of powers that the president did yesterday that offends the system of devolved government? Because he is only trying to execute that part of the national government according to the separation of powers granted by the Constitution.
Not exactly, actually. Well, people are scared of the provincial administration, definitely. It is too recent for me to see somebody with that kind of thing on his head. And no, definitely, people are scared because those things go back to colonial times. So anybody who actually is concerned about national unity, is concerned about harmony and national integration, would not use the symbols of oppression and intimidation as a sign that they're uniting the nation. Definitely, those are symbols to avoid. But nonetheless, if you look at Article 4 of the Constitution, 6.3 of the Constitution, 132.3 and 4, and 131.2, and you read them in conjunction with 6th Schedule, Article 17, you realize that really what the president did was wrong. In any case, the president has venues to discuss these proposals before he executes them.
Yes.
Council of Governors, the summit. He can even call the two parts of parliament,
right.
both the minority and the majority leadership,
yes.
and say, look, how do we exactly implement this? Because, you know, last year in the Senate Committee on Devolution, when the Cabinet Secretary in charge of devolution, Anwar Guru, appeared before us, I remember he proposed to her that if you look at Schedule 6, Article 17, government is actually expected to prepare a sessional paper and table it before the Senate, how you are implementing this particular article, because you are expected to finish the process in 5 years. And I did tell her that, look, you only have 2 years to do this, so we would like to discuss the government policy of implementing Schedule 6, Article 17. Up to now, we have not seen any such policy from the government. So we live in an era when the country is not run by executive orders, the country is run by democratic discourse and consensus building. Yes. Obviously, the president's behavior is very reminiscent of the authoritarian presidential regimes of the past, which this constitution is meant to get rid of.
Right, right. So it is in the system, in the approach, let's say the approach he has used to implement the constitutional requirement of restructuring the provincial administration.
Is it both?
You would have expected public participation.
Definitely, but
parliamentary participation.
No, but I would also have expected a content which is very different. It is not just in the approach.
Yes.
It's also the content of what he has proposed. What he has proposed is actually unconstitutional. Further, you know, this constitution does not allow executive orders. If you read the constitution, there's nowhere in the constitution.
The president cited a particular, I don't remember.
No, I know.
He cited clause,
let me tell you.
Execution of the
let me tell you what he cited. Let
yes.
me tell you, 132. I think he was using Article 132. But if you read that article very carefully, yes. and you go back to the earlier Articles 1 to 4, the president shall, among other things, the president shall, let me see. I think it's 132.
Yes.
I think it is 132.3, if I'm not wrong, or 133.4. Let me see. But may perform another executive function provided for in this Constitution or in national legislation, except as otherwise provided for in the Constitution, may establish an office in the public service in accordance with the recommendation of the Public Service Commission.
Yes.
That is what he used.
So he established the office of the county commissioners.
Yeah. Okay, that's what you used. But it's even that. That tells you, it says, perform any other executive function provided for in this Constitution. Now, he has the responsibility, obviously, of running the national executive.
Yes.
But he must remember that earlier on in the Constitution, in an earlier article, which is very important, and I must read it, he is very limited in doing that.
You see, a lot of the implementation of the Constitution has been the function of the transitional authority, as well as, you know, other laws implemented by passed through the CIC and into the House. Would the requirement to restructure government be left to the incumbent or the government in office to do as he has done? Do you have a problem with that?
Restructuring government really is a function of both the legislature and the executive. You see, that's why I was bringing your attention to the Schedule 6.
Yes.
Schedule 6, Article 17 actually expects the executive to present a policy to the legislature on how they are doing this.
Right.
And also, you see, these two levels of government are interdependent, but they also run on the basis of consultation. So, and that is in the Constitution. So you cannot just decide to make a decision and implement something which is going to affect devolved government without consultation and discussion. That is unconstitutional.
But the question is, the president is likely to argue, and which is his argument, he's only dealing with a part of the national government, which he heads.
No, but
of the functions that he instructed the county commissioners to perform.
Unfortunately, those functions...
None of those functions affects county government.
No. Those functions affect county government because, you see, the governor is the chief executive of the county government. So even though there are national government officials at the county,
Yes.
precisely because they perform those functions in the county,
Yes.
they cannot do it with disregard to the governor's office. You understand?
Yes.
And this is really the crisis with regard to security. Because if you have two levels of government, you can't really have a government which exists without a security wing.
Yes.
Because the monopoly of use of power and force
Yes.
belongs to a government. And the Constitution says very clearly that we have two levels of government,
Yes.
separate but interdependent.
Yes, but that second level of government, the county government,
Yeah.
has been removed from certain functions. So it exists, but government is not general. That government has nothing to do with security in terms of responsibility.
No, that's the point.
It's concerned,
No.
but if you look at, okay, if we take your argument that these officials of the national government perform at the county level and they cannot perform oblivious of the county government, the problem is in terms of administration, talking political science, reporting channels and structures, they have nothing to do with the county governments.
It's just like, Makali, it's just like telling governors that they should also post commissioners to State House or to the President's office. Definitely. If that is the case, then governors should also post commissioners to State House and the President's office to look after their interests. And they will say, well, you know, we also perform certain national functions because when we provide health, for example, you provide health to all Kenyans. And if indeed some discussions are being held at the President's office which concern us, we have represented, it doesn't make sense really. I think the best thing to do is to be faithful to this article on the Constitution, which is Article 6, which says the territory of Kenya is divided into the counties specified in the first schedule. The government at the national county levels are distinct and interdependent and shall conduct their mutual relations on the basis of consultation and cooperation.
Yeah.
They are mutual relations.
Yes.
And in this regard, the mutual relations we have here is where the county government says, surely, yes, the national government has certain functions in our counties.
Yes.
Thank you very much. They are welcome. But once they are doing these functions, we must consult and cooperate.
Yes.
Now, the president cannot decide by fiat through what he calls an executive order that is posting, and as according to his word, very powerful commissioners to the counties who will report directly to him. Surely, this is going...
the state at...
it's as if the president now thinks that he should have ambassadors in the counties. I think the president is feeling a little bit insecure and isolated. When he has seen that governors are becoming very assertive, I think he was kind of scared when Joho said that he was going to take the ports. And all of a sudden they woke up with Anwar Waiguru and say, we must send their powerful commissioners to look at our interests. I think the president should not be so scared. I think these things can be discussed and sorted out.
Well, should they have been discussed, this issue, should they have come up in the summit, in the summit between the governors and the national executive?
No, first and foremost, what the cabinet secretary in charge of devolution have done was to prepare the sessional paper we asked for, in implementing Article 17 of the 6th schedule.
Yes.
If that had come as we requested, a lot of these things would have been avoided. But you see, the problem is that this Jubilee government has systematically destroying national institutions. For example, the NAC government, that was Minister of Planning and National Development then, when we created the National Economic and Social Council, which would have been a permanent council advising all governments on issues of national policy and development, and therefore making it possible for continuity to exist in development. But the National Economic and Social Council has been moribund ever since Jubilee came into power. They have not appointed it, they have neglected it. Instead, I'm afraid, even when the president made this decision about commissioners, he at the same time made some other very, very unpalatable decisions of appointing a Kikuyu to head the National Youth Service, another one to head the railways. Quite honest, this is not being fair to Kenyans, especially if you look at the Constitution, that all Kenyan institutions should reflect the national face of Kenya. And there should be no discrimination, and there should be consideration of diversity in the nation.
Yes.
Now, if you do that, and then the next day you pay Anglo Leasing, contrary to what people, and then you point commissioners. Obviously,
hate speech.
No, it's not hate speech.
Because
I'm just saying.
You have identified the appointment of Githinji at the NYS as a Kikuyu, but that is within the bigger framework.
No, I'm just saying if you do it, I'm just saying if you do it at the same time,
yes,
when people say, surely there are many more Kenyans that can be appointed. And then if you look at the appointment that have done before,
yes,
obviously you raise, that's what I was saying in
yes,
our statement, that the president is creating an unnecessary national crisis, but some of the things he's doing.
right.
Kenyans are not stupid. When you begin repeating actions of the past,
Yes.
when past president did this kind of thing,
Yes,
in the context of the new constitution, obviously somebody must tell you the truth. And some of us exist to tell the president the truth, because that is what Kenyans feel, and that what we feel is going against the spirit of the constitution.
Okay, let's look at it this way. You're the president.
Yeah.
Insecurity has festered. Terrorists are attacking us all over the place. Illicit brew, people are dying. People are blaming the government for inaction, for incompetence. The president moves and says, okay, I'm going to assert my authority. I'm going to have a presence in every pore and corner of this country. I'm appointing my personal representatives right there who report directly to me and will be accountable for anything that happens in the locality.
That's an knee-jerk reaction. What the president should, what the president should say,
complaints about
what the president should do is should say, what is wrong with our institutions? Because obviously, in the constitution, establishes very viable institution to deal with these things. You ask yourself, why? Look, if it's a question of security,
yes,
the constitution requires a national police service to exist and a national police service commission. Are these institutions working? The next thing, the constitution also establishes the national NSIS, National Security Intelligence Services, and gives it a lot of money to gather intelligence. Why is it that our security services don't receive intelligence in time and quality intelligence to prevent some of these things happening? These are the questions you should sit down and ask, rather than thinking that he's going to solve them personally through the president, the office of the president. That is indeed the mischief this constitution was trying to deal with. That we have not succeeded ever since independence to develop very well using authoritarian presidential powers.
Yes.
That has failed, and that's why this constitution was written.
Yeah.
Now, rather than seek to implement this constitution,
yes,
you roll back the clock and say, well, look, the system that was supposed to be done away by the constitution is the one I should now use to assert my authority. Obviously, you're not being very...
But, you know, what the president has said is that the county commissioners shall coordinate county and national functions within the counties.
He doesn't even need to
the
say that.
governors are coordinating county government functions.
He doesn't even need to do that.
They've created an equal...
No. He doesn't need to do that, because you see, what you need to do is that the ministries are supposed to do that. You don't need to have something personally sitting in Kisumu or in Kericho to do that, because the ministries are there to coordinate,
right,
and formulate policy.
Yes.
That's why, for example, when I was in the Ministry of Medical Services and we realized that health was going to be devolved, we started developing systems of posting officers to the counties and making sure that people who remain in Afia House are policy makers and coordinators. So the coordinators being sent to the county to physically be there, they're just going to explode the wage bill for no reason. They should be here, and their telephones, their telex, their emails, there are all kinds of ways by which you can communicate with the officers in the field. You don't need to open another office, provincial office in the counties to coordinate. I mean, that is not very digital. That is rather analog, you know.
So somebody says, you know, the opposition and CORD is in the habit of criticizing government. For example, you're talking about the functioning of institutions like the National Police Service. If it's not working, National Intelligence Service is not working. But these institutions are not, again, at the beck and call of the president, because they've been created in statutes that grant them independence, and that anything or any changes in those institutions must follow a certain procedure, which procedure actually includes involves the Senate, where you're a member. And so you can't switch and say the president is doing nothing, the National Police Service is doing nothing. The mechanisms by which even the Senate, even the opposition can initiate change and reform to achieve the security we desire.
Bakali, please understand me.
That is the question.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. Because the thing is, somebody looking at you, Prof, speaking, says, you know, it's the same Professor Nyong'o, the same CORD. whining, complaining, you know. But when we say, okay, guys, give us something progressive.
But look, I'm giving
nothing
you,
comes.
no, I'm giving you something progressive. I'm giving a concrete proposal.
Yes.
We have a constitution.
Yes.
Let us implement it. That was not whining and complaining.
Yes.
That's being very constructive.
Yes.
We have institutions that have been established to do this. Let us make sure that they perform their functions. That is not complaining.
If the National Intelligence Service, let's talk about those two, is not functioning, legally, what should happen?
Legally, what should happen is that the national...
The president cannot just change the Director General of...
Why
by
not?
fiat.
It's
The
not by
president cannot
fiat.
just change the Inspector General of Police by fiat. A tribunal has to be established to set
But
up,
what-
to
but
establish his ability to hold office, which is not limited to the president.
No, but what's wrong with that? I mean, the point is that the Constitution, fortunately, provides you all these mechanisms
Yes.
of appointment, of removal, of impeachment, and all that.
Yes.
They are very clearly laid down legal and constitutional processes for doing that.
Exactly.
That's what we are saying. We are telling the president, please respect the Constitution. Building democratic institutions takes time. They must be built so that they last. But you cannot say, simply because there's a problem, you
Yes.
go back to the old way to try and solve those problems using presidential authoritarian powers, which have been abolished by the Constitution. You will just create a political crisis. That is not whining or complaining. That is just telling the truth and telling the president how it is. You know, the
Yes.
problem is that people tend not to want to be liberated at times.
Yes.
The Constitution is liberating you,
Yes.
but you don't want to be liberated because you feel that when there's insecurity, you should roll back the clock to where you felt you were secure, but you are not. It's like the Israelis leaving Egypt and going to the wilderness and telling Moses, at least in Egypt, when we died, we knew where we are being buried. Now,
Yes.
this is very, very unfortunate, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Macaulay,
Yeah.
is that, look, we are just telling the president, please, there's something called the Constitution, which must be implemented.
Yes.
This government now is not by one man, it's by institutions and processes. Those
Yes.
processes and institutions must work.
Yes. Yes.
They may not be very palatable to you as the president,
Yes.
but unfortunately, when they are not palatable, that's when you should respect them most, because they are constitutional.
Right, right. Okay, let's go to Anglo Leasing. The
Yeah.
president has directed the National Treasury to pay, to open up the country's credibility internationally to be able to float the Eurobond and borrow money to ease our interest rates. Code ODM is opposed to payment of Anglo Leasing. I saw Ababu Mwamba very, very eloquently arguing against payment.
The
Should
president
the
was chairman.
government pay?
No, the president was chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. He even went to London, interviewed John Gidongo, and went very deep into it, and came back and presented a report to Parliament, very exhaustive report, which said, don't pay.
Yes.
I mean, it's black and white. I have been a cabinet minister. I was a member of the Cabinet Committee on Corruption. We worked with Kroll Associates, and Gidongo was secretary. I know the history of Anglo Leasing from the beginning up to now.
Yes.
If you ask me that we should pay this Anglo Leasing, I would say we must be a very foolish nation, that we know for certain that services were not delivered, goods were not delivered, and we're just paying some entities because, as it were, our lawyers had failed in London. And the lawyers failed precisely because the Attorney General's chambers wrote to somebody there and said, don't defend the Kenyan government.
Yes.
I experienced this when I was chairman of Public Investment Committee over Nzoia Sugar Mills, which was a very similar case,
Yes.
where our own Attorney General did not defend the nation,
Yes.
and the former chief executive of Nzoia Sugar Mills went to a court there in Europe and turned witness against his own country. So quite often you find that we lose these cases, not because the cases are not meritorious, but because we are incompetent in defending our own nation.
Right.
Now we begin looking for excuses to pay interest rates and that our properties will be auctioned. Let me tell you something. We have no properties that can be auctioned in London or in Geneva for that matter. I think they are rented properties. What is worse is that we are not paying our rent. So let's deal, let's deal with the issue.
We don't have our chancery, we don't have property.
No, we don't have
UK,
property. They are
in
rented.
other countries.
No. The ones they are
And our
threatening,
reserves gonna be-
let me tell you, the ones they are threatening that will be auctioned are not actually our properties.
Yes,
Those are rented. So I think what all I know is that we are not paid our rents. But nonetheless, that threat to me is not real. As a sovereign state, with clear track records
Yes.
of these Anglo Leasing things that even the British High Commissioner spoke about when he was here, where our partners in Europe, both in Geneva and London, know the history of this thing, I'm quite sure we can enter into discussion, negotiation, both with the private sector, the legal system, and those governments to sort out this Anglo Leasing thing other than by paying the way they're talking about it. In any case, the Swiss government froze $200 million in their banks on this Anglo Leasing thing. Right. That has not been ventilated very clearly in this case. So I think myself, rather than the president saying that we should pay and then order another investigation, right, the president has not told us what else is being investigated. Because if you ask me, yes, Anglo Leasing has been over-investigated.
Yes, he said they should launch fresh investigations.
Why fresh investigations?
On the allegations of corruption, or that those contracts were signed by inducement.
But he knows, he himself chaired the Public Accounts Committee, and those allegations
so
of inducement.
Investigations should be proceeding to prosecute.
PricewaterhouseCoopers had a report presented to the Treasury, detailed reports. Kroll Associates had reports, detailed reports.
Yes.
Our own Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, Kiraitu Murungi, talked extensively about this.
Yes.
We have John Girongo here, who was Permanent Secretary, who followed the thing from the beginning to the end. I think all that the President needs to do, if he wants to refresh his memories, is just to call Kroll, Pricewaterhouse, Coopers, yes, Girongo, the former ministers for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, to a round table and say, look, is there any evidence that you have that can help us look better into this? But to say that you're going to open investigation, it's really hoodwinking Kenyans.
So what options are left to the opposition or court generally? I mean, the president has ordered the payment. It's going to be done. And then what? That closes the chapter, right?
It doesn't close the chapter, by the way. No. This constitution has a lot of recourse. So we are going to look at it very carefully with the lawyers and see what to do. It's a battle that, we have been, you talked about the opposition in this country has really achieved tremendously. You remember the nationalist movement was an opposition thing. The nationalist movement brought independence. Without opposing the colonial regime, we would never have had independence.
Right.
After independence, the Kenyatta regime, the Moi regime were very oppressive and very repressive. Without resistance to that authoritarianism, we would not have had multi-parties. Yes. After multi-parties, the Kibaki regime started reneging on the constitution after Bomas. If we had not left government to go and champion, we would not have had a new constitution. So people talking rather in derogatory manner about opposition politics are actually being very unpatriotic to Kenyans. They are being very undemocratic. They are not really looking history on the face and saying, what role has opposition politics done in this country to create progress and democratization in the nation?
Okay.
So at the moment, although those who flirt with government all the time because they are always supplicant to authority will say that the opposition has no option. We have always had options, but under very difficult circumstances, and created options to Kenyans which has created progress in this nation. So we are not scared.
Okay, you come out as the party of devolution, or rather you like to own that agenda, CORD and ODM generally. And yet there's a lot that is wrong with the county governments. I mean, there is complaints about luxurious lifestyles or expenditures, that the county governments are not actually an example that we all desire them to be. CORD and the opposition never seems to say anything about that sector of our government. That is not
really true. That is not really true. You don't listen to the debates in the Senate. Do you care to?
At the Senate level, but publicly.
No, even publicly.
People say that, look, CORD is always criticizing
that is not really.
But the devolved governments which they champion are rotting and nobody talks about
it. That is not really true. That is not really. I've attended so many public meetings in the counties. We have had several meetings with our governors and MCAs.
Yeah.
I myself have had, because it is permitted in our standing orders, I have 2 sessions with our MCAs in Kisumu, and you ask them.
Yes.
And really give them a talking, okay? Yeah. So, and in our public meetings, rallies and so on, we talk openly about this. And even in Orange House, we have had very, very serious meetings at Orange House of party organs discussing this, and there are records. So it's not as if we don't talk about this. No, look at what Senator Mudama has been doing in Machakos, for example. Okay, there are many senators. Look at what Senator from
of where?
Yeah, Senator from Makweni, for example.
Yes.
The young Mutula Kilonzo.
Yes.
There are records. Or senator from Turkana, Senator Muñez.
Yes.
There are records where senators have gone public in
on
their own county. Yeah,
counties.
because the thing is that,
yeah.
look, it is counties don't exist for us to tolerate wrongdoing. Counties exist to deliver services. And that's why MCAs, when governors go wrong, have debates on this impeachment. And that's why we in the Senate have said, if you bring a case here which is meritorious, we shall defend it. But if you bring a case here which is frivolous, we shall not impeach a governor, because we must be objective and follow the Constitution. Okay. Now, the excuse that you have transgressions of law in the counties, therefore the county should be abolished, is nonsense. Because you have tremendous transgressions of law in the national government, including paying Anglo Leasing. Nobody has said, let us wind up the national government because of Anglo Leasing, because of ethnic biases. No, we say we should correct those things and make sure that our national government as well as country governments follow the Constitution.
Overall, in a nutshell, before we wind up, what is your assessment of the health of our county governments, or the devolved government? Is it functioning? Is it working?
I think it's working. I mean, like every baby, when a baby is born, there's a lot of birth pangs and early childhood problems. You have to vaccinate against measles, against whooping cough, against cholera. So our counties need a lot of vaccination, democratic vaccination, legal vaccination.
They're not immune from...
and so that they can develop immunity and become... yeah, that's very true. So what we are going through, in fact, that's why the Constitution talks about the 5 years.
Yes.
That's why the transition period was envisaged to take 5 years, because the makers of the Constitution knew that when he established these counties, there are going to be problems.
Yeah.
But they set up institutions to deal with those problems.
Right.
One of the institutions they set up was the Senate.
Yes.
So we in the Senate, we have several committees that look after county affairs. And these committees keep on going around the country to meet county officials, the executive as well as the legislature, and discuss with them the implementation of devolved government. And we've been doing this, and the records are there. Okay. We even call the cabinet secretaries to discuss with them county matters. That is why the Committee on Finance has been discussing very closely with the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Finance and all institutions related to budget making, so that we make sure that things go well. That does not mean that problems don't exist. They do.
Okay. The final thing is, of course, you are scathing attack on the IEBC, which you called a criminal organization. Is that defensible?
It is defensible.
How so?
First, you know for certain that they mess up the BVR through corruption. And they're trying to outsource all their problems to one person called Oswago, when we know full well that the chairman should not escape responsibility and his coterie of officials there. So I myself am very dissatisfied to reduce the IEB's problem just to the chief executive, because we know the process of procurement in the IBC of those BVRs. They were in the media, and I call the IEBC a criminal organization because of what they did. Subverting the democratic rights of Kenyan people through lies and deception. Right. A few days before the election, the chairman of the IEBC went on public media promising Kenyans that it was a perfect election, when he knew full well that the BVR and all those gadgets had not arrived in time for people to be trained and carry out the elections.
Right.
So it was of a crime aforethought. And now he turns around in Mombasa, goes there and begins thumping his chest just because a few neighboring undemocratic countries have praised him. He thinks that should be a certificate to clean him.
You know, you guys are whining because you lost elections.
No, we are not.
Blame it not on the IBC.
The word whining, by the way, is very pejorative. No. Makali, I will not allow that.
They say
the word, no, you have to withdraw that word. It's unparliamentary and pejorative. We are not whining. No, you have to withdraw it before you go further.
You are complaining. Okay, let's downgrade it to complaining.
We are not lamenting. We are not complaining. We're not lamenting. We are stating facts.
That IBC, first of all, what is your ultimate desire? You want it to wound up. You want it restructured,
abolished
before.
No. This particular IBC cannot definitely superintend the coming elections. It is incompetent. It is criminal.
That is not something that code will accept to be in place
No.
before 2017 elections.
No. Not Isaac Hassan and his coterie of people. No. You can't. And I will continue saying that because I know in the past, when we have been right, we have been proved right.
Right.
Yeah. For the sake of this nation.
Yes.
And I know that when at the beginning, they will be doubting Thomases like yourself, who will use pejorative words like whining to defend your ignorance of the situation.
Let me say this. When it comes to county governments that are not functioning, you say these are babies that must be...
But IBC is not a baby.
Whatever.
No,
IBC also was...
No, because IBC was created...
So it has to be nurtured.
IBC was created... IBC was created well ahead. IBC was created so that things like
devolution... This was the
devolution...
first election. Just like this is the first government under the county devolved government. So why don't you apply the same standards when
but you see,
failure here? But failure here is magnified.
No. Unlike the devolved government, the devolved government have not said that. Look, we are not going to commit transgressions.
Abolish them. Why don't you say abolish?
No.
Okay, keep the county governments. We need to nurture them. But IBC.
I'm not saying you abolish IBC as an institution.
Yes.
I am saying get rid of the officials who transmitted these transgressions.
Yes.
Just as much as when a governor does something wrong, he is impeached.
Right.
There's a process of dealing with transgressions in devolved government,
yes,
in as much as there's a process of dealing with IB officials who commit crimes. When I say abolish, I don't mean abolish the institution. Remove the incompetent Hassans who are subverting the functions of the IBC. Okay. So maybe I should remove the word abolish and I say deal with the individuals who are subverting the functions of the IBC.
Okay.
So that you get me clear.
So
that you don't compare the uncomparables.
Now let's come to finally. Of course, when you say all these things, people always point back and say, look, Kasarani, these guys say we can't hold elections, we should demolish, abolish, or remove or restructure. Now you've clarified, remove the offending officers. ODM, elections botched.
Sure.
How far the elections? Sure. In fact, you were told the other day by Letangule, you can't hold simple elections in a stadium. Why are you complaining about a big election?
No, you see, look.
So let's not compare.
No.
I don't want us to go to compare.
Let's not compare because first of all, we accepted. I was the first to accept because I was there.
Yes.
As Secretary General, I took full responsibility.
Yes.
On the floor of Kasarani, I said, look, this is a mess. I am ashamed of you people.
Yes.
Please sit down, let somebody pray, go home. When you have gone home, we shall see what to do because this is a total mess. I am completely embarrassed and ashamed.
Yes.
And I must apologize to Kenyans. I said that on stage.
Right.
After that, we sat down and said, let us find out how this happened. Yeah. Where did things go wrong? Because something definitely went wrong. Things had gone on very well up to that point, and all of a sudden like that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we said, fine, like reasonable people, we must accept our mistakes. We must apologize to our party members. We must rectify things.
Yeah.
We are very much like Isaac Hassan, who is not apologizing, who is not prepared to say, look, we are sorry this happened. He's saying, oh, well, things did pretty well. So we have accepted something went wrong.
Yes.
We established a committee which has done a wonderful job. We have been looking. No, the job is finished, and we have been looking at the product of their labor. And very soon, as soon as our party leader is back, and it's back in a few days,
right,
you will see what to do.
Okay.
So please, usikufe moyo.
To wapatie the benefit of the doubt.
Usikufe moyo.
All right. Any parting word before we close?
Perhaps? No, I think the parting.
All the issues that we've.
I think the parting word, Mukali, and this is very important. I think Kenyans must realize that in order to succeed in implementing this constitution, we need to have democratic consensus building.
Right.
I think we have been fed too much by winner-take-all mentality. We have been fed too much that power is decided by those who. This constitution actually envisages the building of consensus in decision-making through democratic processes. It is not easy because the best person two best people in Africa who knew how to do this, the late Nelson Mandela and the late Mwalimu Julius Nyerere. You remember in 1994, although Mandela knew that the ANC was going to win overwhelmingly, he said, look, I don't want the ANC to win in such a way that when we come into power, we can even change the constitution unilaterally. That would not be good for South Africa.
Yes.
I want the ANC not to get more than 67% of the vote so that we can bring all the others into government. That was not provided in the constitution. But Mandela was very conscious of consensus,
Right.
democratic consensus. The same is true with Nyerere. Nyerere knew that he had a one-party system, but he always said, in our one-party system, let us obey the principle in the African tradition that the elders always sit under a tree and discuss until they agree. So the idea of giving discussion time
Right.
is a price we should pay in democracies. And I'm afraid in this country, because of our history of very antagonistic struggles to establish democracy, which was necessary at that point in time during authoritarian regimes, now that we have a new constitution, the government in power and ourselves, I think we should develop a culture of consensus building, democratic consensus, at all times so that we can solve our national problems and have a national democratic development.
All right. I think on that note, we end our discussion this morning. Professor Nyang' Nyong'o, Senator for Kisumu, acting party leader of ODM, and Baba Lupita.
You insist on that, Makar?
Thank you very much for coming.
Okay.
And for the worthy arguments and views that you've presented. I think the word is public participation, consensus, consultation. That is what he says with regard to the changes announced by the president through yesterday's executive order. Up to you to judge. Thank you for watching.